morning, Ken. Good morning to all, and special good morning to my wife, Rona, the love of my life. רונה, אהבת חיי והילדים, אני אוהב אתכם את כולכם ומתגעגע.
Hello my friend, welcome to SliderTech One-on-One. Today we're visiting Ramon Foundation and we're speaking to Ran, who is the head director of the Ramon Foundation. So tell me about the Ramon Foundation.
The Ramon Foundation was founded in 2010. Ilan Ramon was the first Israeli astronaut. He perished in the Columbia STS-107 mission in huge tragedy. In 2003, and 6 years after, in 2009, Asaf Ramon, Ilan's eldest son, who was an Israeli Air Force pilot, died in an airplane accident. After his death, Rona Ramon, the late Rona Ramon, founded the Ramon Foundation, which is a non-profit that commemorates Ilan and Asaf by doing different inspirational activities. I remember that I think 2 or 3 months after I joined the Ramon Foundation, we met with NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden. It was around 2015. And Rona told him that she wishes to commemorate her loved ones not in bricks and stones, to commemorate them in buildings after Ilan or Asaf Ramon or synagogues or libraries, but in inspirational activities, in education. And the Ramon Foundation now has around 110 employees. We have 3 branches. The first ones do education, leadership development throughout the country, space education, which we utilize space in order to inspire youth in Israel and also in Africa, in Southeast Asia and in South America. And we have a third branch that basically empowers the Israeli space sector. We wish to follow Ilan Ramon's footsteps and support Israeli space entrepreneurs in their first steps. So this is basically what we're doing. We have 3 branches. The first one is doing leadership development all across the country. The other one is doing space education. We educate children. We use space as an inspirational tool here in Israel and also abroad. We're working a little bit in South America, in Southeast Asia and in Africa. And we have another branch that basically work with the Israeli space industry and aims to empower the Israeli space sector by promoting young minds and new Israeli space startups.
I see. And you are with contact with NASA, the joint venture in some...
So NASA is working with the foundation, and we have NASA astronauts who are volunteering with us, who's giving talks here in Israel and abroad. We have in some of our steering committees NASA representatives, actually. We were just actually one of our programs, Ramon Space Lab, just received an honor from NASA Ames, one of NASA's finest research center, that they are giving one of the prizes to the certificates to the children that win one of our competitions. It's kind of interesting story because what NASA promised the Ramon family that every year for the yard site, NASA will send astronauts to commemorate Ilan. And what Rona did is that she basically asked these astronauts who came here for the yard site to give talks in schools. She said, if you're coming here, follow Ilan Ramon's footsteps. He was supposed to go back here to Israel and to do education. We give the talks in schools here in Israel. So,
interesting. Very interesting. What is you took part in the Eitan Steven mission out of space? Can you tell us about the mission?
So the Eitan is the second Israeli astronaut. He's the first Israeli private astronaut, the first Israeli to go to the ISS. Ilan was in a space shuttle. And the Ramon Foundation was the first non-profit in the world that basically overseed and managed the human spaceflight mission. Eitan is one of the founders of the Ramon Foundation and has been supporting us since the establishment of the foundation. He was very close with Ilan Ramon and with Rona and the entire Ramon family. And actually, it's a funny story on how this kind of started, but when he decided that he wants to go to space, we sat in his office and we kind of took a whiteboard, metaphorically speaking, and we spoke about how can we utilize his time in space in order to impact the Israeli society. So while I would argue that all of the private human space flight missions before Rakia, before Eitan's mission, you can argue whether they gave any benefit to humanity in terms of science, technology, and education. I think that what Eitan did basically is that he basically took a non-profit and asked us as a non-profit, as the Ramon Foundation, basically to make an essence to his mission, try to benefit the Israeli society. So we did something like an open code mission. We basically assembled a steering committee, a scientific committee, education committee. We published calls for different organizations, scientists, entrepreneurs, research institute, and asked them to take part. And it is said that 1 hour of an astronaut in space is equals to around $500,000. So Eitan basically gave it as a philanthropy, as a donation to all of these young minds, whether they are educators, students, or scientists or entrepreneurs. And he did a very rich mission. At the beginning, we published the calls. We had hundreds of applicants from various fields. If you're talking about the education that sent us lesson plans or activities from different schools, municipalities, non-profits, youth movements, or if you're talking about the technology and scientific aspects, where science institutes such as universities, hospitals, even startups or international companies asked Eitan to perform experiments.
In space.
Yeah, in space. So basically, the Ramon Foundation kind of facilitated his mission in space. Before it, we kind of facilitated and assisted these entrepreneurs to send their payloads into orbit to the ISS. We assisted Eitan and Axiom basically to build Eitan timetable. And during the mission, we kind of gave them support and back office, whether it was for the Axiom team that facilitated the entire AX-1 mission, the first ever private human spaceflight, or even the NASA control room. We kind of assisted them in facilitating and supporting all of the science and activities that Eitan did in space.
How much experiments did they do in space?
So it kind of depends on how you count them. On the first call, we had a couple of dozens applicants, out of which we handpicked around 44. Eventually, 32 of them, or 34, it really depends on how you count, Eitan executed. Some of them are pre-post, which means that Eitan is doing medical examinations before and after, and Israeli scientists and researchers are being able to analyze the data. Some of them were on board, which means that he actually conducted an experiment with a payload. Some of them didn't work in the timetable that NASA had to send experiment into the ISS, so they will send them within the next few months, which is after actually Eitan is back here on Earth. But we consider them as a part of Rakia. But without Eitan's mission, we wouldn't be able. These guys won't be sending an experiment into orbit. It's considered to be a world record. I mean, it was in a long duration human spaceflight mission. It was probably one of the richest. In terms of private human spaceflight, it was for sure the richest and most fruitful private space mission in the history.
Nice. How many people in foundation are working now?
So we're approximately 110. We have a headquarter and we have instructors throughout the country. Some of them are working part-times, mainly in schools. But the headquarters is around 15 to 25 people. It became quite a big organization.
Yeah, big foundation.
Yeah.
Extremely interesting. And tell me, the Eitan mission is a breakthrough for there will be in the future more like this?
I certainly hope so. I think that one of the you have to realize that when you're talking about human spaceflight, there is a huge paradigm shift. Now, you can say that usually when I'm talking to people about astronauts, you think about Ilan Ramon or Neil Armstrong or Yuri Gagarin. These guys basically were handpicked by governments, funded by governments, and government basically determined their agenda.
Yeah.
But now we are witnessing a whole paradigm shift. And it starts with private companies that are basically sending people into orbit, such as SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and you will see more companies in the futures. And this basically allows individuals to bypass governments and go to space. Now, one can argue that it's only for very high net worth individuals, very rich people. Nevertheless, we're living in a very interesting era, and what was extremely expensive is now cheap. I remember that when I was a child, I think at the age of 5 or 6, it was in 1990 or 1991, I went to an extracurricular activity with a friend of mine who came from a very rich family. And his father picked us up and we drove in his car, and all of a sudden I saw this wonderful thing. His father sent his hand to the dashboard and picked up a very big iron box, and it was a telephone. It was a cellular phone. It was the first time that I saw a cellular phone, and I was amazed by the fact that it was an iron box that wasn't wired or connected to anything. And he talked to his mom and said, "Yeah, I'm coming back." And I was in shock by the fact that I saw this huge thing that's not connected to anything, to a wall or to the car, and it could have done a telephone call. And when I came back to my parents, I told them, "Wow, Mom, Dad, you have no idea what I saw today." And I remember that when I went, after dinner, I went to bed, I remember that I heard my parents talk about this phenomenal technology and said, "Wow, it's really expensive." Because back then, again, 1990 or 1991, I think a cellular phone, this was the first one, really big, I think it cost something like 100,000 shekels or maybe more or maybe less. And today you get these in less than 100 shekels. So I believe that the future of human space flight, and you can see these companies who are talking about the declining of costs because of new technologies and the competition. But it's much more interesting to look at these private endeavors from different perspective. For me as a space person, I don't look at the individuals who are going to space. I'm looking about the ecosystem that supports them. And this is the most exciting part. Until 2022 or 2021, there were approximately 600 people that went to space. Went to space means that they left Kerman line, that's 100 kilometers above Earth. In the next decade, we'll have around 300, which means that 600 people from the late 50s or beginning of the 60s, and we'll have 300 people, even more, only this decade. Most of them, around 200, 250, will be private individuals, which means that more people will go into space. And what's interesting about it is the ecosystem that will support them. Because these people will need private space stations. These people will need new technologies that will assist them to sustain life in space, which means new technologies like renewable energies, air scrubbing, water purifications. Today, the International Space Station that's being run by government, it was designed in the late 80s or beginning of the 90s. The technology there, again, no offense to NASA and all of its partners, but everyone will tell you that it's very old. And here you can see lots of companies that are building new cutting-edge technologies to basically enable ordinary people, because the astronauts that were handpicked by government were really healthy and at the peak of their lives, 20, 30, 40 years old. And now you can see people that want to go to space who are ordinary people, like me. I'm not in good shape. People who are handicapped, people who suffer from asthma. People who don't suffer from asthma can't apply to be an astronaut today. But you will see people that will have the money and will go there. And this will kind of leverage and push forward all of the life support technologies. And people, when they're asking me the future of humanity in space, yes, we will get to Mars. Yes, we will get back to the moon. What's more exciting for me as an individual, as an ordinary individual that lives in Israel, is the fact that you will have, I hope, dozens or even hundreds of people who will live in lower Earth orbit, which means like 400 kilometers from us, like the ISS, that will live in private space stations that will go up and down. And once the prices will go down, I can assume that even people like me will be able to travel to space within 3-4 decades from now. In order for that, 3-4 decades is not that much. I mean, think about the fact that my granddad was born in 1916, and he had a story that when he was 5 years old, he went to the center of his village in Romania to see a very big wooden box. They called it a radio, and he could hear that for the first time people from Bucharest. It was like 400 kilometers from them. So, and at the end of this, I could do video conferences with my brother abroad. But again, 2-3 decades from now, you'll be able to live in a private there. A decade from now, I assume that you'll be able to go with companies like Blue Origin for approximately 100 kilometers and actually fly in space and then get down after 15 minutes. I mean, they say that it will cost around $5,000, which is a lot of money, but it's not
that much.
That's accessible. Yeah. So, you can see Israel is, I'm always laughing when people are asking me to talk about the future in space and whether they'll go to space. I'm saying, I have friends who are taking their children to the bar mitzvah to see Barcelona versus Real Madrid, to see an NBA game. That's $5,000 with the tickets and the flight tickets and the hotels and everything, right? So you'll be able to pay within a decade from now around $5,000 and to go up to space, fly around for 15 minutes and then get down, which now costs around $250,000, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But again, you can see how it progressed, and these pioneers, these high net wealthy individuals like Eitan or like others that are curving the way to us to do it.
Is there any special organization that approve flights to space, or anyone can go willy-nilly and make a flight to space?
Yes, so it's kind of funny. One of the Israeli journalists asked me about the regulation when Eitan came back to space, came back from space to Earth. So I told him, okay, so when he's in the International Space Station, he's under the regulation of NASA. By the way, it's an international accord between NASA and the Russians and the Europeans and the Canadians and Japanese. Now he's getting inside the spacecraft, so he's under the regulation of NASA. When he's entering the atmosphere, he's under the regulation of the FAA. The FAA is like the American agency that's in charge of the sky, because basically he's falling down. So in order to fly a plane, you need to have a license, right? So you need to register the flight. So, and when he splashed down on the ocean, he was under the Navy, the Coastal Guard. So today, in order to fly to space, basically you need to sign the contract with the provider, and they are doing all of the regulation with the different agencies, the different regulatory. So just like when you're taking a flight, you're taking a flight, you don't report to the Israeli. El Al is doing it. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. It was interesting talking to you.
Sure.
and hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
Fantastic. It was a pleasure. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.